Good evening, 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 and good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. WeatherBrains episode number 878. This is the weekly show all about weather. This is the episode for Monday, the 14th of November, 2022. This is the pre-show. It is a magical, marvelous time of the program when we do three things. We share boring personal stories. We have plenty of those. Humorous anecdotes. Sometimes they're not too humorous. And occasionally we say really outrageous things. And if you're looking for the show content, move the slider over about 10 minutes. All right. So, and I see Nicole is here. Nicole, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, James. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. So it's a two-person show on the pre-show here, me and you. If you want to say anything really outrageous, this is your chance.
This is my dream, actually. No.
Yeah, I've always wanted to be on WeatherBrains. I've finally made it. Now, this part does not get on the audio podcast, and it's only on YouTube. We're live now, and this is if we're going to say anything really outrageous. Typically, it happens now. So this is your chance to say something really outrageous. So I'm just saying.
Let me think about that.
Yeah. And now James A. just joined us from the frozen tundra of Tulsa, where he snowed in.
Yeah.
How many snowflakes did you get up there?
We are currently trying to wet bulb down to about 33. So the last little batch of snow is moving across the metro right now, and not much, maybe 3, 4. Just kind of watching it on the cameras.
I like it. Do you have panic in the streets?
Pretty close to it. Yes, sir. It's
no bread and milk on the shelves.
Well, I try to get ahead of that and declare it early, whether or not it's a bread, milk, and toilet paper emergency event or not. So I try to get ahead of it this weekend and say, no, do not panic. Leave the milk in the dairy case.
All right. So I actually sent the invitations out early, which is, I need to do that like every week. I should be more efficient at this job. But and I think Bill Murray is out, and I think Rick Smith is going to lead the discussion tonight. But we'll find out. So Nicole, whatever happens, I'm sorry. It's James A.'s fault in Tulsa, not mine. So
I'm good with that.
Yeah. No. And by the way, James A., guess what happened on this date in 1969?
Is this the day?
This is the day. On this date, November 14th, 1969, Apollo 12, upon liftoff, was hit by lightning. All the telemetry went away. They had no idea of what was going to happen. They thought they had to abort the flight, which would have been extremely dangerous. And John Aaron, take the SCE to AUX, saved the flight, successful mission, the most legendary call in NASA history on this date in 1969. Signal conditioning electronics to auxiliary, went to a backup power supply, the telemetry came back up, and they were able to carry on. So
earning the nickname Steely-Eyed Missile Man.
Steely-Eyed Missile Man. And Aaron had a great role in Apollo 13, the next mission, which had the explosion on the way to the moon, and he basically got them back with this amazing, yes, yeah, oh yeah. Hang on, you know what I got to play here. Oh. See, Nicole is about to hang up on us. I can tell. You can tell by looking at her eyes, she's done with this.
Yep, that same glazed over look everyone gets.
No, she's thinking, what have I gotten myself into? I've got the chemtrail action team on my Facebook page today. Anytime you put cirrus clouds or like a fall streak hole, they have an action team, and they come in from all over the country and attack you. So it's, and they're not nice. I mean,
No.
I mean, they're just not nice. They're mean, and they bad cussing, ugly talk, man, wash your mouth out kind of talking. But I keep volunteering my services as a chemtrail. I want to work the switch you got there, up in the chemtrail plane. So maybe one day I'll make it.
It's an
I see
honor.
what you mean now by the pre-show is there's the crazy talk time.
No, it's out of control.
Because we're very buttoned up during the main show.
Yeah. No, see, when the recorders kick on, everybody gets all proper and prim and with this WeatherBrains. We're unhinged. And in fact, some people say that they just watch the pre-show and then they'll, turn it off at the top of the hour, and they might listen, they might not. So this and we've had some historical things happen here on the pre-show where some things have been said that probably should not have been said, but it kind of leaked out to the world. So Nicole, if you need to share any breaking news, this is it. Company secrets,
Yeah.
Trade secrets. Yeah.
Yeah.
All the good stuff. All the insider trading.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I hope nobody had crypto in the FTX exchange.
Woo! And that just gets weirder and weirder
Yes,
as the week goes on.
I don't have time to fool with that a lot, but I've tried to just keep up with it. And it is a very bizarre story. Apparently, these people are holed up in the Bahamas now, trying to get to Dubai, but they won't let them leave the Bahamas. It just looks like a Bernie Madoff kind of thing. I mean, it's very strange.
Yeah, there were some allegations of using consumer funds for it's just all kinds of wild stuff.
Bonkers.
So at the at the insistence of one of our two boys, I put $100 in cryptocurrency. Let's see what I'm doing with it. Let's see where we stand right now. $46.
Nice.
$46.97. If I could get this out of this thing, and I don't know if I can, but
You'll probably pay a fee for that.
Yeah, it's Ethereum. So I've gone from $100 to $46.97 on what is this? Coinbase. So
but let's talk more about.
I'm holding till it comes back.
God, you're a buy and holder. I kind of want to talk about getting stranded in the Bahamas for winter. That doesn't sound terrible.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Can you do your jobs in there? Just
we can make it work.
Yeah. Get a crew.
Yeah. Pull a Disney cruise ship up there and use their bandwidth. And I see Rick coming in. He had the snow. He had the best snow of the.
Yeah, no. He's clearly in the frozen tundra of Norman. So Nicole, where are you located?
I'm in St. Louis, so we're getting some frozen tundra overnight.
Well,
Ted
there
Drew's
you go.
country.
There you go.
It is Ted Drew's territory.
And Charlie Guido's on the hill. Yum.
Hey, Nicole, good to see you.
Hi, my old friend Rick Smith.
Long time. Yep.
It's been a minute.
Yep. And James, what are you talking about? There's no snow. There's no frozen tundra here. It snowed for 3 minutes and 45 seconds here at my house. And
wow.
That's 3 minutes and 15 seconds more than I got at my house.
Well, it was pretty though while it lasted.
Yeah, but I saw that Texola report.
The what? The Texola? Oh. Yeah. Well, Nicole will get some good snow tonight, I bet.
Have you guys ever been to St. Louis with Harold Brooks before?
Oh, gosh.
Harold is the Elvis of St. Louis. I mean, it's just like this guy. I mean, wow. I mean, we walked in these restaurants and they were just bowing down to him. I mean, so if you ever want to go to St. Louis where Nicole is, go with Harold Brooks sometimes and you will immediate entrance, best tables in any restaurant. I mean, it's the guy's legendary there.
It's the way Rick is with Bob Stoops and Norman. Those two.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how it is. Yeah. We went out to eat, and Kim's not on here, but when we were at the AMS comms warning and comms conference this past summer, we went out to eat with Harold. And I don't think we were hearing stories about that where he goes to restaurants in certain cities and they already know what to bring him. And like it's like he lives there and goes there every day. He has a reputation around the country as various reputations. But
he's kind of a big deal.
He is a big deal, legit.
He is a big deal.
Yeah, y'all talking about me? Oh, okay.
You're
Now,
blessed.
I will say now Troy does have many leather-bound books back there in
Yeah,
his
look at
studio.
Yeah.
And his home smells of rich mahogany.
And I want you to look at this real quick, Rick.
Uh-oh.
Whoa, that scared me for a minute.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to moon. I thought he was going to
Hey.
moon us.
I thought it was going to be a longhorn something or another, but
That
Very
is,
nice.
got it. Okay, good.
That's actually a Rick book. Thank you, sir.
No problem.
Jared
Oh,
Allen.
Hey.
Hello. Good afternoon. Good evening, everyone. How are you?
Jared.
Like you're in
was-
a
I
low
need a
orbit.
cool space background like that.
Jared
and
was
let's-
down the road from us. He was down in New Braunfels. When were you there, Jared?
I was in New Braunfels from November of 2014 to April of 2018.
Yeah.
Was a general forecaster, then a lead forecaster there. So
Yeah.
we crossed paths several times there.
We
with
did.
Troy.
Awesome. Well, let's welcome our television viewers. It is the top of the hour, and I think everybody has joined us here so we can get these recorders going. Here's number 1 and track number 2, and here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
Well, you heard what that man said. We're kind of a big deal. The melodious tones of Bill Curtis. Hey, this is WeatherBrains. This is episode number 878, the weekly show all about weather. This is for the 14th of November, 2022. God goodness, Thanksgiving week is next week. The time is just zipping along here. Troy, what is the deal, man?
I don't know. I agree with you because our semester at the University of Texas ends the week after Thanksgiving. So, I mean, even the semester's over with for University of Texas in about 3 weeks. So,
Yeah. In fact, we use on the air a 10-day forecast, and it just dawned on me that 10th day is Thanksgiving Day. I mean, that's how times are flying here. Let's go to the frozen tundra of Tulsa, Oklahoma. James ate a lot. Are you buried in an avalanche there?
Yes, it has been. I've actually watching some of our cameras. We are seeing snow in the metro right now, but
okay.
it's between 33 and 35 degrees. There's not really much additional room to wet bulb down. But I keep seeing sand and salt trucks driving up and down the freeways. I'm not really sure what they're doing or if they know what they're doing, but yeah.
Well, it looks good. I mean, it's a good look.
Yeah.
I mean, we're prepared. So the other frozen tundra is over in Norman. Kim, are you snowed in?
If by snowed in, you mean there was snow that fell from the sky and then landed at the surface where it was 37 degrees, then yes, we are indeed snowed in. And Rick is well prepared to tell you about his day navigating that.
He is.
It sounds like the messaging of that has been a real treat.
I can't wait to hear this, Rick. Go.
Yeah, I'm suffering from what we like to call anticipatory fatigue syndrome today. Maybe that's the show. I don't know. Yeah, just anticipating the snow. But no, it's never easy with snow. I think lots of people in lots of parts of the country say, well, snow is hard to forecast here. It's hard to forecast everywhere, I think. But I don't know. It's just the wet bulb, the surface temperatures, the things just have to line up just perfectly, and they just didn't quite do it here. Now, if you're 100 miles west of here, that was legit heavy snow that piled up, and it was the best kind of snow in my opinion because it's really pretty. It falls hard. It looks like a big deal, but it's gone so fast. It gets off the roads because the roads are so warm, and there's no big problems. But no, we just didn't end up with a lot here in the metro. We did have a little burst about 5 or 5:30, and managed to get out there and get a little bit of slow motion video of it to make it look like even more than it was. But there were some big flakes for a little while, and I know
Rick, that's the nightmare, right? Like to not have the metro get hit, and you were trying to message it should not be the metro, and everything you guys drew very carefully excluded the metro. I mean, that had to be so hard.
We very carefully drew a very tight gradient on the south side of the metro. I mean, intentionally, but people hear blah, 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 snow, blah, 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 6 inches, and they don't hear all the details. Honestly, the social media wasn't as horrible today as it has been in the past. There's been days where it's been brutal, but today it wasn't really that bad. I think a lot of people got the message. The worst thing today was like I asked people repeatedly on Twitter, could you give us snowfall reports? And you get the snarky, well, in Edmond, it's 0.00. In Norman, it's okay.
There were some great pictures though, Rick. I saw some of the traffic cams in western Oklahoma and southwest Oklahoma. It was really pretty pictures. I guess it wouldn't be pretty if you were standing in it, but yeah.
It would have been pretty if it had been just a little bit here, but anyway, I don't. There's places out there that got 5-6 inches. We verified the winter storm warning in at least a few of the counties, so it's all good. It's not even winter yet, so
nope.
Come on.
And by the way, anticipatory fatigue syndrome is the working show title right now. This program, I mean, that gets no better than that. But
it's for real. It's a real thing.
Yeah, no, it is. And the ones that bother me are the ones that they'll send you a picture of a yardstick in a mud hole and say, here's a look at our snow total here. Yeah, we've all been down this path. And the guys in St. Louis had a bus the other way Saturday morning as the weekend started, just I guess to the east and south of St. Louis. We'll talk to Nicole about it in a minute. It was a big snow that was kind of unexpected. So it's not easy. I don't care where you are. I mean, if you're in Minneapolis or Norman or Nashville or whatever, it's just hard. The only good snow forecaster on the show is Jen Narramore. Jen, you're good at it, aren't you?
Oh no. I stink at that. And it's hard up here, even though we get a lot more of it. It's hard to forecast it up here too. I did see some good snow yesterday. I was with a friend of mine up, she lives southeast of Cleveland. So we actually had some nice lake effect bands that came in, and I like the first snow of the season. It's so pretty. And then I'm done. So I'm done already, but we've got teams coming in here in a couple of days. So
I think Jared Allen, let's go for Cheyenne at this point. How about that? How about WFO Cheyenne? I figure Jared's got some tips for us. So
I think he does.
Exactly. If anybody's going to do it right, it's Dr. Neil Jacobs. He's the most qualified snow forecaster on the show. Neil, you're good at it, aren't you?
Not in your area, maybe east of the Appalachians, but that's about it.
Just bowed out, James.
Yeah. So Dr. Jacobs is our East Coast correspondent. Where are you coming from this week, Neil?
I am central swampland right now. Yeah, it was actually, well, I should take that back. I don't want to confuse the real swamp down in Louisiana with the fake swamp in DC. But I'm up in DC right now, headed back to North Carolina here in another day.
Awesome.
Not a lot going on in the weather here. It's boring, actually, kind of cold, but otherwise boring.
Yeah, it's really what's producing snow in Oklahoma, what snow they had, it's going to rain down here, and then we're dry for at least 7 days and kind of cold. But having said all that, let's bring in Rick to bring in our guests before they hang up and run. So Rick, go.
Yes, please. Let's not ruin this.
Yes.
We got two great guests tonight, and this whole show was the brainchild of our first guest. I want to introduce Nicole Grams. And Nicole, it's so great to see you again. It's been, I don't know how many years, but Nicole and I got to meet through Kim, actually, at the University of Oklahoma back when we were working on some stuff, which we can talk about later maybe. But Nicole has the coolest background on the show tonight, so she's already won that award. She's an account manager for NOAA at Esri, and I'm going to let Nicole in just a second explain what Esri stands for and to even explain what GIS stands for, because the topic of tonight's show is GIS and all things mapping and weather, and it there's much more to it than you would ever imagine. And when you start digging into all the layers, no pun intended, of information that's shared via GIS. So Nicole's been in that position since 2022. She got her bachelor's in meteorology at Ohio University, and then her master's in one of the coolest majors I've heard of, a master's of science in geoinformatics at the University of Oklahoma. That sounds very cool. Nicole, welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Thanks, Rick. It's so good to see you again. Kim, you too. All of these other names that I've revered from afar on weather Twitter or even watched on television back when I lived in Norman. I mean, this is pretty freaking cool. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're so glad you're here. It's pretty freaking cool to have you here. So
Absolutely.
appreciate it. Our second guest tonight is a good friend. I've known Jared for a long time. Jared is my counterpart. He's the warning coordination meteorologist at WFO Cheyenne, Wyoming, and he's laughing at us vigorously as we talk about our little snow problems here. Before that, Jared worked as a forecaster and a senior forecaster at WFO Austin, San Antonio, the New Braunfels office. And then he began his weather service career as a student employee, and then he was a meteorologist at one of the busiest offices in the country, WFO Jackson, Mississippi. And Jared, I believe this is correct. You got your bachelor's and master's at Mississippi State. Is that correct? Welcome to WeatherBrains.
Hey, thanks, Rick. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm at Mississippi State, very close to James Spann territory. So great to see everybody across the board that I've had history with and interactions with. And James, thanks for the awesome invitation, and to all for WeatherBrains. It's exciting to be here, and for all the help, to James for his high investment in Mississippi State's broadcast program. I know you'd come over often a lot to the Southeast Severe Storm Symposium that Mississippi State would put on. So we really appreciate all your efforts in helping the students there grow over the many years that you've been a part of that. So thank you.
Hey, Hail State. Hail State. That's all I can say. Hail State.
Big Mississippi State fan. Love that program. Okay. Well, let's get started. We always like to kind of start out just getting a little bit of background and kind of, how long you've been interested in weather, what got you into it, and kind of give us a little roadmap of how you ended up trying to, well, James is on here, but I'm not going to try puns, but I just said map on a GIS show. So that's all I'm doing. That's my punnage for this evening. So Nicole, we'll start with you. Kind of talk about how you got to where you are today, what your interest has been in weather, and just kind of a little bit about your history and background.
Oh boy, how long you got?
Uh,
I think I
as
can
long as you
do it.
need.
We got all night long.
Okay, until the snow starts in St. Louis around midnight.
Yeah.
according to
Oh.
Yes.
St. Louis.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'll start then. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, in a suburb that was directly on Lake Erie, and I was just fascinated by moving water. And even though we didn't really get all that much exciting severe weather, when we did, I was honed in to my local television meteorologist. I was watching Dick Goddard. I was watching that Doppler radar, and I would kind of motion to the screen like I knew exactly what was going into the storm and tell my family when they should take cover. I saw a water spout on Lake Erie once, and that sealed the deal for me that I was going to go into meteorology. The trouble was that I kind of wanted to do a little bit of everything. I went to Ohio University knowing that they had a strong broadcast program and thinking I would start there. And when that didn't feel quite right, I entered the NWS Student Career Experience Program. I was so fortunate to spend a summer at Charleston, West Virginia, WFO. I learned so much about operational meteorology, but that didn't feel quite right either for me. But luckily I had one more shot in undergrad to figure it out. And that was through a NOAA scholarship program where I got to go to the Hurricane Center and do a little bit of research to operations. And that is how my history with GIS began. I was doing some slosh model verification, and my awesome mentor, Jamie Rome, gave me a spreadsheet of high water marks and said, here's a GUI where you can put your cursor on the lat lawn that matches the high water mark in this table. Then you're gonna go type that number in the table, create a column to calculate the model error, subtract one from the other, and that's how you verify it. And I was like, I just took this class and I think I could do that all in software and give it a spatial perspective. And the rest is history. Went to Oklahoma, where I continued my extreme indecisiveness, but that was great because I had an interdisciplinary master's that Rick mentioned. So I had some awesome NASA space grant funding to do anything I wanted with weather and GIS. And yeah, from there, I've worked in public sector, private sector, startups, global companies, and landed at Esri about 3 years ago and took over the role of NOAA account manager, which means I'm the conductor of all of our various symphony of colleagues at NOAA and at Esri that are working on cool stuff together. So I manage that relationship, which is the most full circle possible job I could have hoped for. I'm extremely thrilled to be in that role and to tell you guys that whale of a tale.
That's very cool. That's one of those jobs that didn't even exist when you got into meteorology and certainly got into school and everything. So that's just this marriage of all these different disciplines is very cool. And the GIS and meteorology is just a natural. And we'll come back to you in a little bit and talk a little bit more about some of the basics of GIS, but I want to jump over to Jared now. Jared, same question for you. Kind of give us a little bit of your history, your origin story, your background, how you got into all this and how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Background is I grew up a lot of different places growing up, and especially I started out here in the West on the Front Range, up in Casper, Wyoming briefly, then Burlington, Vermont, Corpus Christi, Texas, and then Tupelo, Mississippi, all through till I was in high school. And all of that really allowed me to be exposed to a lot of different weather and different cultures, which was amazing. I remember being in Vermont, I guess that would have been 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade timeframe. And I was always super excited if any of the tropical storms would get close enough to New England that some of the cirrus blow off would come across New England. And always being fascinated with weather too. Whenever I was 5, I was living on the Front Range near Denver, near the foothills, would always kind of wonder where the thunderstorms came from over the mountains, what's on the other side of the mountains, and was actually up in my bedroom watching a thunderstorm, listening to the thunder, and all of a sudden you hear just a flash bang, and the house actually got struck by lightning. So I have extreme and massive respect for lightning. And as a WCM, you as a WCM, we pre lightning safety significantly all the time, because it's like, yeah, it's literally happened to the house I was living in. Blew some shingles off. Luckily didn't start any fires or anything, but the fire department showed up, and I was pretty sparked on weather from that particular point right there. But growing up, I also liked rocketry. I liked airplanes, aerospace. So I initially went into aerospace engineering for my first 3 semesters at Mississippi State. But then I was in a class called statics, where you have to calculate the stress on a beam at a certain angle and when is the structure going to fail. And it was cool. It was fine. It's exciting stuff. But at the same time, there was a big severe weather outbreak happening across Mississippi. And I was like, man, I'd kind of rather watch radar right now, or look at radar and like, oh, why is that storm becoming supercellular? Why is it behaving? Why is it doing a left split? Why is this one hooking a little bit more? So thought about it for a week, changed majors, and went into operational meteorology there at Mississippi State for undergrad. And then master's, I did a GIS as my master's, also at Mississippi State. And also then got the SCEP that Nicole was talking about at the same time while I was a grad student with the Weather Service. So I volunteer with the Jackson, Mississippi office basically every weekend or every other weekend. And then that was like right during 2005, massive hyperactive hurricane year, Katrina, Rita, and that just really cemented my love for weather and how to message the weather and the preparedness across either locally there at Mississippi State, across the state, or through my connections at the Jackson, Mississippi office. Whenever I was learning, how do we message it to partners in the public? And that's actually what led me down towards my thesis, which was trying to determine what's the probability or likelihood of how much tree damage, vegetation damage is going to be done in a landfalling hurricane environment. So therefore, how much does the Corps of Engineers or any responding agency then need to start to prep for recovery efforts of dealing with all of this vegetative debris? And what are they going to do with it? Where are they going to put it? So that was a large, massive database, which as we get into GIS is a significant amount of databases that then you can correlate all of these different variables together geospatially. So you would bring in, okay, the max hurricane wind environment of Katrina, the soil moistures, the soil types, the amount of rainfall, the max wind gusts, the sustained wind gusts. And you have 50 different variables, and like, okay, how do these variables relate to each other? Or do they not relate to each other? Which is what my thesis ended up coming around to. And then as I got into the Weather Service, always had a knack for communication, being partner focused, and then leading towards preparation and preparedness. And then how can we in the Weather Service use GIS to assist us with that messaging? So the one big thing that really almost, I wouldn't say, well, I'd almost say single-handedly directed me towards one aspect of my career was the WCM at the time in Jackson, Mississippi, Steve Wilkinson, who's now MIC out at Greenville, Spartanburg, awesome fellow. He came to me and it's like, Jared, what happens if the Pearl River floods to 36 feet? Can we map that? And what are the implications for messaging, or what are the impacts going to be? And this was right after the Nashville floods of 2010 along the Cumberland River. So I was like, well, let's look into it. So then we started working with the Corps of Engineers, the USGS, and they developed a couple models. They said, hey, here's a model that you can use at the Weather Service. And then we at the Weather Service in Jackson, Mississippi were like, okay, do you want to put this information out, or do you want us to? Because we had a little bit more, the Weather Service has a little bit more of a communication arm versus the DoD Corps of Engineers. So they're like, oh yeah, you guys, we're good with it. We double checked collaboration wise, you guys put it out. And so when the next time we either had a big flood on the Pearl River through Jackson, or that year 2011, we had massive Mississippi River flooding going on too. And that was like the first time, maybe not quite the first time, but one of the first real instances of an office putting out near real time up to the 6-hour time frame of what the River Forecast Center forecast was for hydrologic river flooding decision support services, or what we know in the Weather Service as DSS. And the media picked it up. And it was a really good integrated warning team environment right there. So that carried over to some of my time in Texas, another very flood prone area, flash flood, creek flooding, significant that can happen there. So I worked with some University of Texas professors there. And essentially what kind of started out of that group is now what the Water Center has partially become. So it's really cool to see how maybe one question from one of my previous WCMs has led into the continuity of operations and flow of operations at the Water Center, which is actually not too far away from where you guys are down there in Tuscaloosa. And so we're really excited in that realm just to see where flood inundation modeling goes in near real time here in the future as it gets rolled out here in the coming years. So that's a little bit of some of my background, flood inundation mapping, and then how to present this information in a cloud environment so emergency managers and or the public can access it. And then that way we can share our preparedness message with them so they can take the necessary mitigation aspects, and then so we can save as much lives and property as possible.
Excellent. Really, really interesting, the pathway that you took. And it all started, like you said, with just a question from Steve down there in Jackson, and kind of led you down the road that you're on today. And we're going to get more into detail on some of the specific things you've done, like SAFER and some other things here in a little bit. So we'll come back to that. I guess we kind of need to back up a little bit. I mean, we assume everybody knows what GIS stands for, but I want to go back to Nicole, since Nicole she's very much has a GIS background, literally and figuratively there on the screen. What is GIS? What does it stand for? And what are some of the basics of GIS? Why is it such a big deal when it comes to weather?
Well, it stands, Rick, for Geographic Information Science or Geographic Information Services, depending on who you ask. I would say that geographic information science is the application of the tools that we call GIS. And I think that a lot of people picture GIS to be, I don't know, either this offshoot of computer science, or maybe it's only that class you take to learn how to do cartography and make PDF maps, and it's not much more than that. But really, humans are so adept at spatial thinking. We might not know the name of our county, right, Mr. Span, but we do solve problems in our day-to-day life by thinking about space and place. So if we are buying a new house, we think about, what school district is that in? That's a polygon, and we're trying to pick a house within a certain polygon where we want our kids to go to school. We're considering factors such as price, commute, location to amenities that are important to us, just parks or services. That's a really spatial problem that all of us tackle at least once in our lives, whether we're renting or buying. And there's so many more like minuscule examples, like I need gas after work. Where's traffic going to be? Where's gas cost the lowest? And where can I make only right-hand turns so I don't get stuck at that awful light on West Lindsay and Northwest 24th and Norman? These are the types of questions that humans employ in our day-to-day life. And GIS is basically the type of technology that we use to make those decisions easier. So maybe that's radar scope. Maybe that's Google navigation. Maybe that's Yelp, where you've searched in a certain radius and you want to find the best restaurants within that space and place. We really use GIS tools in our everyday life without thinking about it much. So I would say humans are pretty much spatial thinking experts. You don't have to have a weird degree for it.
Yeah. Nicole, one thing that impressed me, and this would have gone back probably to when Jared was down in Austin, San Antonio, and we began to really develop and get GIS involved in our warnings and our watches to look at what SPC does in Norman and then the local WFOs do, and to know that we can tell how many schools and hospitals are in watch or in warning areas. And also, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Nicole, to some degree, I think even though it's probably dynamic, but we can also tell how much manufactured housing or even where we could find where there are trailer manufactured housing parks or trailer parks, so what I've called it in the past. That to me is amazing. And Nicole, I show my classes that in geography and the environment here at UT because I want them to understand, where this is going. I think it's really tremendous.
Yeah, it's all about the impact. When we're in this meteorology space. What and whom is the weather impacting, and what are the implications of those impacts? How do we need to change our messaging? How do we need to change our response, our mitigation in the future? Impact is such a powerful application of GIS.
That's a great introduction, and I just love watching Kim. Kim is just glowing and so proud of all your preaching in the chat, and it's just awesome. I mean, that's really good stuff. And I mean, we could stay here till midnight talking about all the different applications. We're going to get into some of them specifically, but Jared, I'm going to go back to you for just a minute. I mean, in my mind, you've been kind of at the forefront of leading some of the GIS efforts. I remember you came to speak at some type of GIS workshop at the Weather Center back when you were still in Jackson. And I remember that's when I first saw you, I think, introduce this concept of SAFER. Can you talk a little bit about that specifically, and then maybe a little bit about some of the other dashboards that the Weather Service uses, what the dashboard is? That's a kind of a relatively new GIS term for me anyway. So talk a little bit about the SAFER application that you developed and what that entails.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I'll go really quick. Another definition for GIS acronym is a geographic information span. And I say that because of how good, and what you teach as well to your, in case to your viewers, especially during severe weather, especially during tornadic supercells, whenever you have that, you're showing this, the CC drop, the correlation coefficient drop from the dual pole radar, and saying this is where the tornado is. And you are giving a geospatial location, not of, hey, this is latitude X, longitude Y. You're saying this is by the Piggly Wiggly in Tuscaloosa. This is by the Chick-fil-A at this corner and this corner. It is by, Waffle House at this corner and this corner. And that's going back to what Nicole says, that people are geospatial. Sometimes they don't think about it like in real time, but when you relate a significant weather hazard, i.e. a tornado debris signature, to where that is relative to a Chick-fil-A down on the road, that's going to really determine someone's action and decision point. So I just wanted to make that clarification really fast, that broadcasters, when you use all the maps you use are obviously GIS based. The communication of using that information really helps save a lot of people. So appreciate your approach to that, like hyper local GIS application in real time right there.
James Spann's the only one that's ever on television called out. I'm going to bow out from, I forget the name of the place always, but a certain establishment in central Alabama. So
let's hear it.
Wesley's Booby Trap Lounge.
I'm sure they appreciated you keeping them abreast of the latest developments.
Oh, brother. Where's the soundboard here? No, and I do want to talk more about this because this is a fascinating subject for me. GIS is just crucial for our success. But, we have learned that people are now struggling with geography literacy in this country. They can't find their house on a map, and they've gotten used to the phones and the turn-by-turn directions, which is great. But anyway, it's, and I don't want to get into it now because I'll take us down the tubes here, down a rat hole. But I have to use these locations on the air for people to understand, because maps are not, they struggle with maps, and we have to do something better. And so I've got questions for everybody, but we'll take the show down the hole before we wrap up here.
Well, we do sense make with landmarks, and whether or not we know a highway number, a street name, an address, maybe less likely than knowing the mall or the neighborhood school or the neighborhood park. So I think that's what's critical about it.
Well, I find it interesting, and help me, Jared and Nicole, with this. I've had discussions with some of the WCMs at various WFOs, and I never really thought about it. You know how you can in warnings, if you choose in WarnGen, when you're preparing those warnings, to put mile markers for interstates, but they don't mean anything to anyone. Mile markers don't, but you know where the Dairy Queen is in Kyle, Texas, down the road. And I wonder about that. I mean, do the mileage markers mean anything to people?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. If someone is, traveling right then and there, maybe they might, but they're probably going to be in between mile markers themselves, and probably don't have a better understanding. In certain cases, it worked well whenever I was in the Jackson, Mississippi office, because we had a good relationship with the Mississippi Highway Patrol, and we would actually call them up. And if we've got a long track supercell tornado that's likely going to cross I-55 down there through central Mississippi, they would try to get people north of the track, south of the track to close off traffic, so people didn't know they weren't driving into a wedge, rain-wrapped tornado or something like that. So in certain cases it can, but in other situations it doesn't. But kind of going back to the SAFER component, SAFER stands for Situational Awareness for Emergency Response. And essentially it's designed for internal hyperlocal situational awareness, not only on the Weather Service side, but for emergency management and even for the public relative to specific hazards. So Troy, just like you were saying, for specific locations, you can plot hospitals, you can plot schools, you can plot where the power plants, where are the large sporting venues, where are the mobile home locations, and then where is this other critical infrastructure that might be within the path of, say, a hurricane, or vulnerable to storm surge, or if you're talking blizzard conditions, how many hospitals are going to be under a blizzard warning, and are people going to be able to actually travel to the hospital if something, really bad is happening, and for people to take contingencies to make sure that, if power goes out, or if you can't get out of your driveway for 3 days, what are you going to do if a medical emergency comes around? Which is actually something we contended with last March with a very significant blizzard up here. So Safer is an online platform for emergency managers to utilize that's thematically based per hazard. So severe weather, fire weather, tropics, river flooding, all in one place, bringing all the weather service information and other core partner information, USGS components, Corps of Engineer components, into a one-stop shop geospatial platform online, just to use it as best as possible for individual needs.
Well, Jared, it seems like back in my Mississippi days, and I still have a lot of friends there that also remember the WFO at Jackson in some of the initial early days had a good working relationship with what I think they used to call Mississippi Power and Light, the statewide power company there. And on high transmission lines, they would watch for breaks when they saw, when they had a tornado moving in a certain area. And there was a close working relationship, I think, with Jackson back in those days about how to track just by watching where the damage was or outages were being reported.
Yeah, that's correct. From across Mississippi and even was it Tennessee Power up there? Was it TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority?
TVA.
Tennessee
Yep.
Valley Authority, and I had to reach back for that one. But they helped like North Mississippi as well, and yeah, they could definitely tell where the transmission lines, another GIS application that they
Yep.
see real time, and then we could see real time. And another component, we all, James Spann showed his phone. And Nicole mentioned Google Maps. Another interesting component is that you can see obviously the traffic on Google Maps. And then if a tornado goes through a certain location, you can definitely tell where traffic starts backing up or starts to get congested in those areas too. It's another way that we look at, okay, was there an impact there, or maybe was there not an impact there?
Excellent stuff. We're going to talk a lot more about some of the other applications that the Weather Service uses, but I kind of want to go back to Nicole for a minute, and never really got into kind of what your exact role is as the kind of the NOAA account manager. I mean, I'm assuming you have your hands in some of these things we've been talking about, but talk a little bit specifically about what you do with NOAA and some of the NOAA things that you're involved in. It could be Weather Service too, but some of the projects, applications, and things that you kind of have your hands on.
Yeah, so in every business, especially one that makes software, we have these various components, right? We have the business development arm of the company. We have the developers, the product engineers who build what we sell, which is ArcGIS. It's the world's leading software platform for spatial analysis. And we have support, for customer support to assist our users, and so on and so forth. So I'm in the business development arm of the company. And when I asked my successor, my predecessor, he was the NOAA account manager for like 20 years. Everyone that worked at headquarters knew Jeff Donzie. He's legendary. And so I was like, I'd love to apply for this job, but how am I going to possibly fill those shoes? I decided to spin it as, hey, I can't supplement. I mean, I can supplement, but those years of experience I can't replicate. However, what I can offer is being a meteorologist, being personally acquainted with NOAA, understanding the structure of the agency, the line offices, what each of them is responsible for, and just having a really deep appreciation for NOAA's mission of science, service, and stewardship. So my role pretty much is to help NOAA be as effective as possible in using our tools. Sometimes that means bringing in experts from our professional services division and suggesting, hey, I think I think you guys could be really successful if you got a little bit more guided help. Sometimes it's just brainstorming with the customer of how they can approach a complex problem. And sometimes the customers just make us look good. That's what Jared does. They come up with a really creative idea using our technology, like the Safer dashboards, like the damage assessment toolkit that is built on on technology that Esri makes called Survey 123. And Parks Camp, comes up with this idea and operationalizes it. And before you know it, everyone in the Weather Service has Esri app on the office iPad. So we have lots of stories like that of innovation led by the field that become widespread across the region or across the whole of the NWS. And obviously, as a meteorologist, I talk a lot about the National Weather Service, but NOAA's primary line office that uses our technology is actually the National Ocean Service. We have some really great implementations in the Office of Response and Restoration. So after a hurricane, how does that division of NOAA fulfill their emergency support function obligations to understand the impact on the environment? They go out and use a field application on their phone, store that data in a server, make the web services accessible to other partners that need it. We have some really cool stuff going on in NESDIS. They just presented at COP27 in Egypt on a virtual reality experience showing urban heat islands in Washington, D.C., using some of our technology to make a digital twin and then put on an Oculus device and look at the urban heat island effect at street level. It's super cool. We have awesome applications in fisheries, looking at how a changing climate is impacting the spatial distribution of species so that fisheries managers can anticipate the decisions that they need to make to preserve these fish populations, to protect the livelihoods of coastal communities whose economic development depends on these sustainable fishing practices. And then we can't forget OAR, we can't forget NOAA Corp. Really, our technology is being used across NOAA, and I really just get to appreciate it, promote it, offer a little bit of insight when asked, or maybe when it's uninvited, I offer it anyway. But I'm just having such a good time learning what has been done to date, and then assisting with some of the projects that are in their infant stages, envisioning what's possible in the future with NOAA. It's been every day. I think I just get excited seeing NOAA emails in my inbox. It's a dream come true.
Well, I wish I could feel that way. No, I'm just kidding. No, that's really cool. One thing you mentioned, I think a lot of people just going through the recent hurricanes that we've had, some people may have been exposed to it and didn't even know it, the GIS component of the NOAA, the overflights that they do after the hurricane, and they're posting of the, and we're able to see the damage imagery after the hurricane and swipe back and forth to see what it looked like before. I mean, that's GIS in action, right?
Absolutely. National Ocean Service Remote Sensing Division. We have a really cool project going on to modernize some of their imagery processing workflows and some of their flight planning aspects of those missions. So that's a key one, data collection in the aftermath of major events.
Awesome. And Jared, Nicole mentioned Survey 123, the damage assessment toolkit. You probably don't get to use it as much in Cheyenne as you did in New Braunfels and Jackson, but I mean, and I can talk about it too, but I mean, that's an important part of what we do in the Weather Service as far as analyzing damage. And it's not just tornadoes, but it can be windstorms, can be tropical events. I mean, talk about a little bit about if you've had experience with the DAT or the Survey 123 app and how important that is to us.
Sure. Yeah. Not recently, but 2020 set a new record for a tornado surveyed at 8,500 feet using the DAT, which was quite remarkable up in the Snowy Mountain range. We had a QLCS, a quasi-linear convective system kind of come through, which again is quite rare around here, especially for our mountains. And couplet tightened up pretty good. And we went up and did a damage survey. And sure enough, there was about a 1.5 to 2 mile damage path. Certainly was a tornado with the convergence of all the trees. Luckily, there was trees there to make the determination. But yeah, whether it's on an iPad that our office has, we have 2 iPads, or we have an office iPhone. It's got that ArcGIS 123 damage assessment toolkit software or tool on it, and it's a very robust integrated system to where if you are out surveying, you're able to get your latitude and longitude, you take pictures of the damage, and then based off the pre-entries and how Parks Camp designed it, is that based off all these damage indicators, you can then see, okay, based off this tree being snapped at this level or having this type of damage, or this, then today or this year, we also had a ranch get hit with a tornado too. So, this building, what type of building is it? What type of wind damage are we seeing compared to what this database is on this program in the DAT tool? And then we can move our cursors up and down a little bit to best estimate the wind speeds based off the damage indicators. And there's over 100, maybe even 150 damage indicators in there based off all these different possibilities of wind speeds. So that's how individuals that myself and Rick go out, or anybody at a WFO to do a tornado damage survey, can then put this geospatial survey information in. And then as soon as hopefully if you have good cell signal, you can hit the send button, and then it goes to a centralized database. It gets quality controlled back at the office. And then once you're good with it, you write the whole narrative, you write the sequence of events that happened, you have all the pictures geolocated, which is fantastic within that system. And then you can get that out to, if it's a significant event, I know, Rick, you've had some very significant ones, you get that out to FEMA partners, state partners, local EM partners, so that resources can get there even more so. I mean, you have your first responders, of course, but then you have, if it's a larger significant, EF4, EF5 type of situation that went through a populated spot, then you can, then and maybe FEMA gets involved, then they can dedicate more resources to specific areas so that equitable distribution helps with those resources as well. It's just not going to one spot, but you're looking at the whole tornado path length. And then so people at the beginning and at the end and somewhere in between are also getting the same help that they need. So that's one of the really cool things about GIS too, is when used well and used properly, it can really help with equitable distribution of services. And so I saw James mention districts and gerrymandering and some components. One of the really cool things about, the midterms or elections, regardless of affiliations, is GIS front and center, because you get the maps. Like if you watch whichever channel you want, they're showing all the different states, all the different districts, all the different counties, and that's all the data like within all of that different geospatial information. And then huge amounts of funds are dedicated based off that type of GIS system because of the data. So it's always interesting to watch and really fun to watch, because the maps and the geospatial information is fantastic to watch on those nights, just from a pure map geographic lover perspective.
We're all map nerds, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. I'll really quickly tag on to that with the awesomeness that is the DAT. We're piggybacking off of that right now as forecasters go out and do the damage surveys that you're talking about, and have included a social science component to it. It's being beta tested in a couple of forecast offices. Hopefully will be Weather Service wide eventually, but you guys encounter survivors and you're getting stories from them. So while you're collecting all this data about the damage the tornado caused, and you're trying to then use that to rate it, you're also in this profoundly unique position to capture some important social scientific data for us. And all of it is tied in with the GIS, and having that geographic information all tied together is especially powerful. In the social science side, so often we'll get, if we do get anything after these events, it's usually devoid of its geographic context. We kind of just survey people and everything gets pooled together, and you get this like percentage of people who say XYZ, but context matters, and it's geospatial context. Everything comes back to the place people were embedded in when the event occurred, and what that means for their sheltering decisions, and if they had the capacity to go somewhere else, and what it means for the actions that they took, and if they had to think about getting family together, and all the things that go along with that, and how they use time. It's also how they use space. So I think Rick is showing it right now. Norman is one of our offices that's participating. So he has our survey up on the screen. And yeah, it's all tied in with that system, the powerful applications that we can make, Nicole, when we're combining these data sets. And I'm curious to know if you have other examples maybe of, then you're talking about a lot of physical science data that's used for societal applications. How much do you get to combine those pieces?
Well, first of all, I'm having the best flashbacks to working with you on this type of social science research, where in the aftermath of the April 27th, 2011 outbreak, you went and you did this exact thing. You asked people about their experiences. And when we went to replicate that methodology, which I now know is called participatory GIS, we went to replicate that in our own central Oklahoma area, but we gave people sitting at tables little maps, and we asked them to like draw the areas of impact or relate their memories to place by like drawing something on paper. And then I think I geo-referenced them and found like geographic means of people's perceptions of risk. Anyway, man, that was cool and ahead of its time, Kim. To answer your question, there are some really interesting examples of participatory GIS. I just learned about one last week at the Esri's Ocean Weather and Climate GIS Forum. It was in a coastal community in Belize, where a group of graduate students stayed in the community and asked people about their understanding of sea level rise and how it's impacting this small, isolated community, and how environmental changes over time, i.e. since the last group of graduate students visited this area 5 years prior, has impacted their ongoing impact, to go back to that word. So 5 years ago, when the students were first there, was only one, there's only one road in and out of the community, and it wasn't paved. And the road's since been paved, and they were all able to pinpoint a map through these community surveys, much like the one you're talking about, where the scientists are interviewing people at their home locations, or kind members of the community are walking to the area where they see an impact and saying, look, since this street was paved, we're seeing more standing water. We're seeing more impact in this area downhill from this paved road. It seems like the water is funneling. So this type of participatory GIS is just really cool. And I can't believe you put it into the NWS damage survey process. That is just so ingenious and cool. I hope it's successful. I want to hear all about it.
I want to hear about it from future me. It's a process. I'll tell you, like GIS, it's a process. But yes, it's pretty great. It's something I've joked with Rick about. It was you can call it participatory GIS. It's also been called counter mapping in more like radical geographies, but it's also mapping indigenous ecological knowledge. This is a phrase that Randy Pepler and I tried to tell Rick, this is what we're doing. We're capturing traditional indigenous ecological knowledge. And he just kind of looked at us and said, great,
Okay.
I am here to help you.
Tell me what I can do and how to spell that. I'll
show title.
Yeah. But it is really exciting. It is, and it's very powerful. I'm excited to hear about that in Belize. I think it's really neat when we open ourselves to the idea that our publics might have just alternate ways of reasoning about space. They have one. It's different from us, and so it's really important for us to kind of find a way to step into their shoes. And GIS, like these kinds of counter mapping, where you're turning to the people you're trying to relate to and having them tell you about their geographic imagination. How is it that they see place, and how is it that they construct their ideas of the movement of the atmosphere in relation to that? That is where the good stuff is. And it's especially important, I think, if we're going to be advancing forecast technologies and doing things like trying to help communicate uncertainty properly. Well, that's actually a spatial problem. And mapping uncertainty is very, very hard. So we really should start with understanding how people are understanding place and its relationship with a moving, severe weather pattern or, individual storm, whatever, and try to build out a system from there. So I'm so thrilled by everything that you guys are talking about. I will toss this to Neil in a second. Something, Jared, that I think would be a fun story to hear from you. You mentioned being in Central Texas when you were developing these sort of flood tools and dashboards. And were you doing that around the time of Harvey? And if so, how did that bear out?
Very great lead in there. Yes, I was doing it during Harvey. We at the office were gearing up tropical operations, 12-hour shifts. I was on the midnight rotation through that. And with the well-proven methodology from the Corps of Engineers, I guess the office got an inquiry from an emergency manager along the coastal plain about, okay, how bad is this going to be? What does 40 inches of rain mean? So we were looking at the ensemble hydrographs from the River Forecast Center, and some of them were projecting a rise from the current at the time, 5 feet, up to 50 to 55 feet in the next 3 days. And they're like, well, what does 55 feet look like for the town? So on those midnight shifts, I would run a couple different scenarios, and then patching it through the WCM to the EM at the time. We gave, okay, in the best possible case, it could be on the edge of town. In the middle case, it could edge like into portions of the town. Worst case, it could almost get to the town square. So we almost, in that case, gave an ensemble hydro DSS perspective for river flood mapping, and kind of the middle scenario played out in the next 3 days. But what had happened message-wise is that map plus the ensemble hydrograph allowed that emergency manager, and in the state of Texas, that was the city emergency manager. In the state of Texas, the county judge is like the main person you have to convince to get action done. So those visuals, the map, the geospatial map, and the hydrograph convinced them that it is going to be this bad. So they did reverse 911 code red areas for the at least middle tier scenario, and then they gave a buffer towards the worst case. And so they evacuated people and ended up working out quite well. They had no high water rescues other than they had to pick up a dog, and the dog was fine. So that was a really encouraging situation, to where using that methodology in a hydrologic ensemble forecast, as as bad as Harvey was and slightly unpredictable, that where the highest amounts would be, Houston got 60 inches, portions of the coastal plains got 30 to 40. That messaging and that technology allowed for people to get out 2 days in advance and save a lot of stuff as well. So it was actually, it's actually interesting you brought this up, because it's actually one of the more rewarding events that I have worked as a team. So it wasn't just me that did all this. There were some other messaging components from other people, but it was a remarkable instance of hydro DSS application to help those people in LaGrange County, Texas. So it's interesting you bring that up, but yeah, Harvey was quite an ordeal, no doubt about it, across South Central and East Texas.
Great, thank
All
you.
right,
I took the gavel from Neil. I'll give it back.
I am I'm proud to be the ranking member, so I'll take my 5 minutes now. I've got a quick question on crowdsourcing data. So I'm headed down to South America here soon and doing a lot of stuff in the Amazon. There's absolutely no data that we can find at all. And I'm wondering, do you have people are there apps, are there other things that you can take? And I would imagine being really, really far away from cell service, are you doing anything where people can record data and then upload it later? Is there any kind of like crowdsourcing mechanism with your apps that you can then upload this?
Yeah, the way the damage assessment toolkit works as well is in a disconnected environment, where if you're capturing data in the middle of the Amazon and there's no Wi-Fi, you can store the location and the data that you've collected on the device. And then when you're back to connectivity, you basically send it back to the cloud, back to the data service where it's hosted, wherever it resides. So we do see a lot of disconnected environments that are really good for those areas where connectivity is going to be sparse.
How do you quality control that? Or does it matter? I mean, I guess maybe some of the variables you're collecting are probably pretty obvious. What about what other variables do you collect with this type of information?
Well, in some cases, you can collect motion, such as if you were standing still or moving when you added that point. Sort of an altimeter, perhaps a speed, depending on your type of sensor, you can collect maybe even your elevation. On a general phone, what you're collecting is kind of purpose built. And maybe, I don't know if this is how you feel about your research, Kim, but we started off with the damage assessment toolkit example where we're collecting points, photos, we're entering notes. What else, Jared? So we have this one purpose where we're collecting data, and then Kim's group is adding on, enhancing that, expanding the data model, adding to the schema to collect additional information around people's experiences. So maybe I'd turn the question back at you, Mr. Jacobs. What kind of data do you need to collect? Because we can build that with you. We can put it in. It's a drag and drop survey form.
Well, the reason why I'm going down there is there's some ecotourism industries that were looking for some fly fishing guides to map out new backwater areas for potential recreational fishing. And there's nothing down there, literally, except for some native tribes that have given the green light to explore this. So we don't have any maps. I'll probably bring a bunch of different battery packs to keep my cell phone charged for a couple of weeks. But my guess is, other than solar power, we probably got nothing to power anything. So yeah, there's there's nothing but maybe some satellite imagery. So
That's
we'll
gonna
probably be providing back more data than we'll be consuming. I was just curious. It made me think about what sort of capabilities you have for crowdsourcing data as inputs instead of users using your data as sort of output information.
Yeah, I think the crowdsourcing potential is really the purpose behind some of our form-centric tools. We have tools that are more about collecting data, a point here, a line there, but there are other, sometimes you need to collect things more like an anthology or attributes, kind of thinking back to Tennessee Valley Authority. Maybe you're inspecting some assets and you need to capture all of, how well something is being maintained, what maintenance was performed on it. So I guess all that to say, I think you could collect anything you want. It could be pictures, it could be simple points that represent, I saw somebody fishing here. You could turn on your location and walk around a boundary of a lake that seemed good for fishing. I think there's a lot of ideas, and the users can kind of define that.
So speaking of user defined ideas, can you get into a little bit of the business model of how much do you put out there as far as open source? And are you seeing a lot of creative uses of this data in business models that you hadn't even thought were like a legitimate revenue stream?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so the open science part of the story first. Yes, Esri is a privately held for-profit company. Our developers build tools, we sell them. However, we have a lot of integrations that are open source, that are shared on GitHub, or that are shared via our authoritative data providers through channels where we can basically force multiply whatever that data is. So let's take NOAA data, for example. We can put that into the Living Atlas, and NOAA has said, go ahead, we want our QPE to be shared broadly. We want our stream gauges data to be shared broadly. So you can search the Living Atlas of the world. That's what we call our online library of data, and get this data from the authoritative provider. So in a way, that's kind of open source by the data owners themselves. Back to our software though, and this was not meant to be a whole episode about, we got to celebrate GIS Day, guys. It's coming up on Wednesday. We don't need to just talk about but some of our workflows for data science, such as change detection or object detection, we publish in the Living Atlas as Jupyter notebooks. So let's say that you really aren't a data scientist and you really don't know how to use really complex desktop GIS. You can go into the Living Atlas and find a Jupyter notebook that will look at Sentinel-2 imagery, and you can derive building footprints from before and after a major storm for a given area. That might be your only input, to be honest, and look at the change in discernible structures. Better than the old school shape files, touche, Neil. The cloud possibilities lower the barrier to entry for so many scientists and non-scientists alike. And the open science story is really important to Esri, and it's really important to NOAA because we don't want people to reinvent the wheel. If there's already a tool that can be shared broadly with the community. So definitely our GitHub projects are great to check out. Some of our, our bridge, our other data science tools are openly developed, and we're always kind of collaborating with various, FOSS4G, Open Geospatial Consortium, or OGC. We work with these agencies and try to create tools that can be used globally according to standards by all types of end users. So That's a really good question.
That's an awesome answer. So one more quick question. So if you're like a faculty member and you're teaching GIS, does Esri provide teaching material, coursework, curriculum, prepackaged labs, things like that? And is there links and things that potential faculty can go to learn how to teach this?
I love this question. There is, and actually, if there are any climate faculty out there listening, I need your help. Our Living Atlas team not only produces content and tools, they also produce what we call Learn Lessons. So Learn ArcGIS is the main website that you'd want to go to. But in a Learn, I think there's one called teachingwithgis.com. You can also choose your level of education. So are you a K through 12 educator? Are you a university professor? And there are pre-packaged lesson plans if you are a substitute teacher, you could walk in and give these students this assignment that day with no special technology, all done in your browser. So I'm gonna double check if it's Teach with GIS. Yeah, I'll put the link in the chat. It is a really good resource for delivering lesson plans. And if any K through 12 teachers are listening out there, we have, but there is a global program called Geo Mentoring, where you can get a GIS or geospatial professional to voluntarily mentor your classroom and help you with the objectives in your syllabus or with your programming, and work hands-on with your students, whether that's in the field, whether that's online. Geo Mentoring is also a really cool program.
So I'm listening to this conversation where you're both talking about the great things you can do with GIS and that, are so influential in the field of meteorology. And then I'll start with Jared and then bat it to Nicole. You'll have like a slightly different perspective from the forecast office and then the corporate perspective. But where do you think our field is with geospatial analysis in a big picture sense? Like, is this something that you feel is a niche thing that only a couple of people are doing? Do you feel like it's coming more into the fore? And Jared, I can't help but reflect on, we were in a meeting today. Actually, you might have been the person who said this, but I think it was you who said, for the specific application we were talking about, for the forecast office, as long as it was from the sky down, then it was counted in your purview. Once water hit the ground, though, there were other agencies that took over. Like it was something you could not touch in the particular space we're talking about, winter weather. Is that something that's a piece of this? We're with GIS, we're really talking about coupling what's going on with the atmosphere with stuff going on the ground. How much can the Weather Service get involved with this? And how much does it? Jared, I'd love your perspective on that first.
Yeah, great questions. Starting with the first one of where the Weather Service is GIS wise. The field across the agency is amazing. There are experts in each pockets of WFOs across the nation, and right now I've actually got a little group chat going over here on a different tab where I see NWS GIS mutual aid chat ongoing right now. So we just had Hurricane Ian, we had Tropical Storm Hurricane Nicole, we had those big tornadoes down in Texas that impacted Shreveport's area. So within the Weather Service right now, the field is growing itself by supporting itself in the GIS aspect. So we have this GIS mutual aid program that, say, an office or group of offices has a significant weather event, tropics or tornadoes, and they want to see Sentinel-2 satellite data to maybe extend if they can't reach an area to survey satellite-wise, could that help them lengthen the path potentially? Or for Ian and Nicole, you had not Nicole Grants, but Nicole the tropical storm. We had, where's the worst storm surge going to be? What is the actual rainfall that's occurring now or the next 6 hours or after the event has happened, so that somebody that's in Lubbock or somebody that's in Missouri, someone that's in Seattle is putting these GIS maps together for the impacted offices in Florida because, they're super busy. So this way we're kind of building on this great mutual aid program within the Weather Service where what's known as a blue sky day in some other office where there's limited or no impacts, but hey, this person can help with a very needed resource in an impacted office, GIS wise, for a core partner. That is growing right now. Need to get a little bit more policy information at regional and national headquarters, but it's the WFO field supporting the WFO field offices right now, and it's really exciting to see where this is going to go. To your other point about the differences in the atmosphere versus, say, surface, there's a lot of different interagency coordination that goes on. Weather Service isn't the only player out there. There's private entities, just like Esri is. There's meteorologists, contractors with Department of Transportations. So up here, farther north, where we get a lot of wind, a lot of snow, they have contract meteorologists within DOTs. So what space does the Weather Service have for weather impacts and all the GIS that goes into that and messaging for that? And then what about the road impacts, surface transportation impacts? Whose lane is that? And where does the Weather Service lane end? Where does the private meteorologist DOT lane begin? Those are the ongoing conversations we have all the time. But if you have a really good relationship with them, then you can say, okay, per this DOT, this is the type of road impacts that they're expecting. And then we can put that messaging out to make sure that the public is as informed as possible. So these DOTs have really good GIS maps as well. They'll say, okay, is this road open, closed, partially open to light, high profile vehicles if you have high wind? Or, what are the road conditions? Is it slick? Is it ice covered? Is it black ice? Is it, low visibility due to fog or moderate to heavy snow? So if their GIS systems are saying that, and that's public, and through the relationship and collaboration that we have with them, then we can echo that message so that, in a great integrated warning team environment, all these agencies are working towards the best component of keeping the public informed and safe, especially in the traveling realm whenever it comes to winter.
To be honest, I can't think of what to add, Jared. I mean, how are we doing with geospatial literacy? I think is the core of the question. And I would say that meteorologists are inherently quite literate in thinking geospatially, but all of the partners that Jared just mentioned, DOT, Army Corps of Engineers, emergency management, speaking the same language as them. And I don't mean their, EOC language or their transportation lingo, but I mean like the same data language, I think is what is really key to expanding the use of GIS in the field of meteorology, whether that is public sector or private sector research. I just think that being able to communicate, and of course weather models do this already, right? They communicate a prediction at a latitude and a longitude, but what are those other components? What else is happening on Earth at that lat long is, I think, the language that brings us together. That's the place where partners begin to understand what you are trying to communicate, and where they in turn can turn around and make decisions. So I would always love to see more spatial literacy, especially, back to the conversation about people knowing where they are on a map without the use of their phone. I think there's definitely something to be said for geography education in school, but I'm optimistic. I feel good about our science workforce.
Nicole and Jared, I've got a question for you. We touched briefly on broadcasting and GIS and the severe weather use of this. What else could broadcast meteorology be doing with GIS, not just in severe weather, but everyday weather communication to help enhance telling a weather story that day? It's kind of a weird question to ask because I don't know where to go. It's kind of like a new software update on your phone and you say, I didn't know I needed that, but it's really cool.
That's a super good question, which I'd love to ponder about with you. Are you going to AMS? I think I'm trying to think outside of in the blue sky type of days, because I've got a lot of example for event-driven communication, such as if you have a digital twin, like a 3D model replica of the community, several communities that you're broadcasting to, and you're trying to visualize inundation. I think lots of us have seen that one where the broadcaster is standing in a safety circle as she's showing the storm surge rise above her and get higher and higher. But that's not a good blue sky example. So I want to think about that. What do you think, Jared?
I would share that broadcasters can maybe explore some additional Weather Service data sets, especially the probabilistic data sets in the winter realm. I know you don't get too much winter in Oklahoma, but you got some today and you might get some more this winter. But what are the probabilities of 1 inch of snow in Oklahoma City, or up here, or Edmond, or Tulsa, or up here? What are the chances of 2 inches or 4 inches? So the Weather Service has really starting to move and is moving into probabilistic information. And I believe those data sets, at least in KML form, are out there for broadcast ingest for your shows. So you can say, instead of giving a range, especially if you're in the 3 to 5 day range out of an event, and you don't quite have the confidence, you don't know certain scenarios could play out, lower end, higher end, middle of the road end. And so you can give probabilistic information, like what are the probabilities of 1 inch, 2 inches, 4, 6, 8, 10, up to 12 or 18. Case in point was here for our blizzard last year. It was the highest probabilities we internally and then externally messaged of seeing a foot or 18 inches, where we had 90% probabilities of 18 inches. It's like, well, it's gonna be pretty gnarly late Saturday into midday Sunday, and then things are probably going to be, if this pans out, and we had high confidence based off that probabilistic messaging, which could potentially be echoed by broadcasters, that things are going to be shut down for quite some time. And that was the case where Cheyenne itself, a very hardy location, used to snowstorms, used to high wind, was shut down literally for 4 or 5 days. Like no one is going anywhere during that time frame. And so that probabilistic information plus the tone, you guys know about, when you use certain tones with your voice, James Spann, you got your sleeves rolled up, people know. And so that's one way, GIS database wise, of using some probabilistic information when you're out from a particular event, when you're about to dial in on what the likelihood of those snow amounts are, or ice amounts are, or probabilistic wise is used in severe weather, and SPC puts out the probabilistic information as well, in addition to their outlooks. So there's a couple aspects GIS wise of bringing those in.
Yeah, we've kind of experimented the last couple of winters with probabilistic snow totals for Tulsa, kind of fitting a bell curve. You're most likely snowfall is going to be here, but this is not out of the question over here. It's just a lot of setup. When you assume, I think now most people are 2 screening when they're watching TV. So, we have a distracted audience, I think.
And let me ask you guys. So let me go back to my big problem. Everybody on this show is smart, smarter than me. But we've got this problem with geography literacy. What can we do? We were at a baseball game, large crowd, and we handed out maps, blank maps with county lines and state lines. We asked people to put a dot within 50 miles of their house. Only 8% of the people could do it. 8%, that's it. And, we post these maps on social media leading up to a big event, whether it's winter, severe, whatever. And immediately you're inundated with what about my hometown, because they can't understand that map. What advice can you give us to make mapping more user-friendly to a world that's got a real problem with geography literacy? I mean, what help? I'm asking for help here.
I think there's a degree in which we're forced to meet people where they're at. And so if that is watching James newscast while also looking at their phone, I know that we have location-based warnings that we get, but let's say we're not in a watch, we're not in a warning. Something I thought was really cool was during the height of the pandemic was when we could see county-based health data on Google Maps. And you could see if you were traveling from one location to another, what sort of CDC risk was in that other area. So maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe we just need to put more information in people's apps that they already use.
Yeah, and I agree with James. Is that people are using two screens. They're watching the coverage on television and they've got their phone in their hand. And I think that can be used to our advantage. We have to use it the right ways. But yeah, that's a great idea. But it's just a challenge. And I think about it all the time. And the biggest problem for me, it's not during the event. During a tornado event, I'll tell people where that thing is. I understand the people and the culture and the geography here better than anybody else. I can tell them where it is and they can understand it. But leading up to the event, 3 days out, 2 days out, 24 hours out, we use maps. We have to use maps. We have to use maps, and we just have to be better at it. And as we are now in the tornado season here, I think about it a lot. So.
Maybe it comes back to that K through 12 question that Neil kind of alluded to. How can we help educators make teaching geography technology easier?
Yes, bingo. Absolutely.
Well, even at a polling place with 2 precincts Tuesday, and somebody was in the wrong line, but they knew they were close to 61st Street. They just didn't know north or south. And so I don't know. I'm not pessimistic enough to think that we're far off, but that's also a biased sample because somebody that cares enough to vote is probably somebody that cares enough to know where they live. So
I think as a ridiculous example, I live on a street where one half of the street is one municipality and the other side is the other municipality. And information systems aren't perfect, whether they're geographic or not. And at the DMV, my address in their information system comes up in the municipality that's not where I live. So my driver's license says that across the street municipality, which is great because it gets me a discount to the gym I go to, but that's not where I live. So even if we have technology, data maintenance can be a struggle for, entities, small and large.
I do remember, I'm just going to put a quick note in here, when you're mentioning like people having different geographic points that they relate to too. This weekend, I got to go down to Idabel. I was doing some stuff with disaster relief. My husband's uncle is pastor of a church down there. So we were working with people who, you get this cross section of people who is probably more representative of the general public than people who will come to, things like to go vote, James, what you were just mentioning, or people who would come, Nicole, to our tornado town halls who are weather interested, weather savvy. You're getting the people who are probably most impacted and have the least resources to deal with what's gone on. And I can tell you, maybe they couldn't see a map and know exactly, where they're within some mileage with one fixed representation on a map, but they knew exactly where that tornado had gone with respect to their house. And they were telling me, even people who were questionably literate were able to make spatial references that were fairly advanced. And it's things like that that give me hope. Nicole, you keep talking about being optimistic. I am too. I think we have to give people credit. They navigate the world that we live in, and they're used to dealing with things like what you're talking about, municipal boundaries and, waypoints that are familiar. And it's really just a matter of speaking their language instead of ours, and bringing things down to earth. I think, James, that's one of the reasons why you're so successful. One of the ways that so many people navigate is just by landmarks. It doesn't have to be something so complicated. We don't have to make this so hard. So Jared, I think you were about to say something. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, I'm just going to say, I think it has everything to do with mental maps. I mean, we have mental maps, but on the other hand, we don't know the county we live in, or we don't, this sort of thing. But the mental maps are always something that's always intrigued me about how we know sort of where we are. But
yeah, and indeed on the mental maps, and as Nicole alluded to, kind of working with the young, working with the younger generations as much as possible. I've got a third grade outreach event coming up here soon, and whenever we're talking, tornado hazards or locations, it's like, well, one, where do you go inside your house? You have larger spatial awareness, but where do you go, internally spatial awareness in a house? But then we also ask, do you know which city you are in? And do you know what county you're in? Yeah, even, at the third grade, fifth grade, sixth grade levels, so that they can start to see if they see, Laramie County, which is where Cheyenne is, then they know, oh, maybe I need to start taking shelter that I'm in a tornado warning. And especially if they get it on their phone where it says your area or your location is under a tornado warning, please seek shelter immediately. So it's all about the continual education of everyone we meet, of course, but certainly on the younger generation when we're able to interact with them.
And I will say, I'm in a school every day, and the elementary school teachers are doing a great job with these kids. I mean, that they are literally teaching how to find your house on a map. What county do you live in? What city do you live in? What's the nearest largest city? I would trust second and third graders more than most 50 and 60-year-old adults around here these days. But I'm very encouraged over the next generation that will be very good at geography. I think that the teachers are really doing good, at least where I am here.
Yeah.
I think it's the motivation of knowing they need to know versus I don't need to know that. I don't need to know that.
Yeah, absolutely. James, I know we need to get to some recorded segments here in a minute. I did want to have one more question. Hopefully Nicole and Jared, you guys can stick around for a little while longer. But one question to kind of wrap up this segment, we'll come back again with some more. We probably all get this question anytime you're interacting with students, and students are saying, could you look at my resume? Can you look at my application? And one of the standard things I always tell them is, they ask, what can I do to stand out? GIS is always at the top of the list. Is that still a good thing to recommend to people, do you think? And what, other than just saying, take a GIS course, what more do you think we could say? What else is out there that we could, to give them an even better idea of what kind of GIS experience they could get? And Nicole, I'll go to you first, then Jared.
Well, one suggestion, we have something called Massive Open Online Courses, or MOOCs, and that is a great way to learn from a geospatial expert on a wide variety of topics, from cartography to spatial analysis to data engineering. So if a student is looking for more learning opportunity outside of their Intro to GIS 101 class, that's certainly one avenue. I will say my GIS professors were outstanding at being platform agnostic. So by that, I mean, they showed us QGIS, they showed us ArcGIS, they showed us a program called GRASS, which was maybe one of like the OG systems. They showed us, hey, if we use this Python library that's open source compared to this Python library made by Esri, compared to this Python library that I wrote, which one performs the fastest? So I think I was really fortunate to have awesome professors at the University of Oklahoma who approached geospatial technology that way. Because then I was able to enter at least my particular path and work for a wide variety of industries and have a little bit of experience using all these different things. I'll let Jared take the weather service perspective, but I guess, you know, my piece of advice for meteorology students who are wondering, you know, what's a little bit more that I could do? Try Jupyter Notebook. Put your senior project into, you know, try out some spatial libraries and put the result in a story map. I think that's a great communication tool, and I think that could really help you stand out.
Yeah, continue further echo that to Rick's question. Is it still valid? Absolutely. The quality of meteorologists coming out of school these days is highest that it's really ever been, and probably will stay that way for the foreseeable future. So the application process and trying to get into the Weather Service, any way that anyone listening that is looking to get in to differentiate yourself from others that are just meteorology, GIS is an excellent way to go. Coding, any way that you can do coding as well, whether that's GIS related or not GIS related. Nicole mentioned Jupyter Notebooks. That's a great way to get involved with all of that GIS and coding combined aspects. But whether it's coding, whether it's GIS, whether it's soft skills of graphic design, communication, maybe even have an emergency manager background or have a master's in emergency management, soft skills of leadership components. What else have you done? What other organizations have you potentially led? Would really help further your chances for anyone listening to get into the Weather Service. But GIS is definitely among the top for sure, from communication to data analysis to the ways that we message to the core partners and to the public, ultimately to carry out the mission of the Weather Service.
Awesome. I hate to pause here because the discussion is so good, but we have to take a break here for a couple of recorded segments. We've got Tony Rice and his astronomy report. We've got Jen's This Week in Tornado History, and Nicole and Jared. Hopefully you guys can stick around because we have to do Picks of the Week, but we will be back with Picks of the Week and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook.
NASA's Artemis 1 mission, which will test all the technologies and systems that are needed to return astronauts to the moon, except for another launch attempt early Wednesday morning, the 2-hour launch window that opens just after 1 a.m. But another lunar mission reached the moon over the weekend that you might not have heard about. The Cislunar Autonomous Positioning System Technology Operations and Navigation Experiment, more easily referred to as CAPSTONE, is a microwave oven-sized CubeSat that weighs about 55 pounds. It fired its thrusters entering a very unique lunar orbit on Sunday evening. That orbit, it's a near rectilinear halo orbit, or NRHO. And CAPSTONE's the first spacecraft, albeit a tiny one, to fly an NRHO. It's also the first CubeSat operating at the moon. An NHRO is a significantly elongated orbit, and it's remarkably stable. But better yet, it offers better fuel efficiency over other options for orbiting the moon. When we go back to the moon, it's going to be a lot less like Apollo, where we spend a couple of hours or a few days on the lunar surface before returning home. It's going to be a lot more like the modern era where astronauts spend months doing science on the International Space Station. NASA, along with the ottor nations that make up the Artemis Accords, plan a small, also human-tended space station orbiting the moon called Gateway. This is where astronauts will take day trips to do that science on the lunar surface. And this solves many of the complexities that living on the surface of the moon brings with working there. You see, Gateway will also fly an NHRO, and Capstone is providing valuable planning data. Elsewhere in the sky, the Leonid meteor shower peaks before dawn the morning of Thursday, November 17th. Now, this isn't a particularly active shower, but it's been known to produce outbursts in the past, with 100 or more meteors per hour visible. That hasn't happened since 2001, and it's really not expected to happen this year. But data does indicate that there could be a few more meteors than usual visible on the night after the traditional peak. So if you see a bright streak across the sky later this week, it could be a Leonid. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, a total of 17 tornadoes occurred on November 15th, 1989, 5 of which were in the state of Georgia. We have a summary at tornadotalk.com about one of those tornadoes. It was rated F3 and crossed through parts of Habersham County. The twister developed west of Clarksville near the intersection of Georgia Highway 17 and 105. For the storm data entry, winds were estimated to be greater than 150 miles per hour. The maximum winds reached within 10 feet of ground level. The worst damage was in the Stone Pile community 5 miles northwest of Clarksville. The second stories of several homes were totally removed. 6 homes were destroyed and 6 others were damaged. 3 mobile homes were flattened. 17 chicken houses on a poultry farm were leveled and approximately 250,000 birds were killed. There was property damage reported in the New Liberty area and tree damage near the Habersham-Rabun County line. The tornado dissipated at the mountain ridge 7 miles west-southwest of Tallulah Falls.
Well. Time now to dig into the email inbox, and just maybe we've got something in there this week.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
All righty, I got a couple of emails to share here. The first one is from our friend James Lewis. He had a question about what is everyone's thought on the International Fujita Scale, presented by the ESSL, I guess the European Severe Storms Laboratory. Apparently it was used to rate the 2021 Czech tornado. I don't know much about the scale. Rick, are you familiar with it at all?
I'm not familiar with it either. I got a interview request about it a couple of weeks ago, and I said, you got to talk to Jim Ledoux. That's all I know about it. So I'm honestly not familiar with it very much.
Yeah, I'm not either. So there's your answer. We don't know. We'll tell you whether we know or not. Nate Larson wrote to us tonight because we were, talking about the frozen tundra. He wins as he lives up in the Fargo area, and it looks like it was 23 when he wrote to us, and they were going to go. They got about 2.5 inches of snow, maybe another 3 inches, and forecasted for a low below 0. So Nate, you win the Frozen Tundra Award. And then Tyler Jarabak wrote about a week or so ago, and he was listening to some of the old episodes, and about JB was looking for a song, and he thinks he found the song. Who Stole My Underwear? So who wants to talk about
what?
That's the song. Yeah, that's the song. Who Stole My Underwear by the Sharp County Band. He did not say which episode it was, but he said listening to pre-YouTube episodes and JB was looking for a song. Think I found it, and it all sounds like JB's musical taste. So
wow.
Yeah.
See, only on this show do you get this information, not on any other weather podcast, but only on this one.
That's right. You got it. So if you have other songs that you would like to talk about in regards to your underwear, please share at email@weatherbrains.com.
It's a pretty brief song.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I knew that was coming.
Oh man.
Wow.
Yes,
Oh,
email
boy.
at weatherbrains.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter where you may get more puns from James Aladot. I don't know. Whenever he writes his funny articles, every Thursday we put it into your inbox. And you can sign up for that by going to our website. Back to you, Span.
All right, so let's kind of dive into picks of the week here. This is where we all go around the horn, and everybody's going to share something that is really cool, that is weather related. We'll let Jared and Nicole kind of go at the end here. We'll give some time to come up with something good here. So let's start with Dr. Jacobs. Let's see if Neil's got a pick of the week for us. Go, Neil.
I think I'm lucky because hopefully no one else is going to pick my pick of the week because it's a pretty funny article. It is in Forbes. And the title is Meteorologists Are More Accurate Than Political Pundits.
Ooh.
Where's their credit?
Yeah, I like that. Is that a Marshall Shepard piece? Did he write that, Neil?
No, it's
No?
not.
No?
It's in the Forbes Science section.
It's
Okay.
a Dennis Mercero.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a pretty entertaining article.
Awesome. All right. And again, the deal is all the links will be up on the website, weatherbrains.com, in the show notes for this week. All right, let's go to James Adelot in Tulsa. Is it still snowing there by chance?
I think we probably have some flurries. We actually shot back to some drizzle, and the temp went right back up to 36 from 35 at the airport. So we'll take that any day of the week. My pick of the week is from another panel member, Rick Smith in Norman, and his social media mitts, as he posted with a big TweetDeck screen in front of him and his anti-typing mitts right there on the keyboard, ready to go. His restraint mitts. We have them too, Rick. We have them too. We have a little referee flag. I just throw it. And
wow.
They're hanging on a column in our operations area. They're really there. So, yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, Rick, while you got the horn, let's go. What's your pick of the week?
There's so much stuff we didn't get to talk about tonight. One of those things is something called a story map. And my pick of the week is NOAA has a collection, and there may be others out there that Jared and Nicole know about, but one that I found was a collection of NOAA story maps. And story maps are really cool. And maybe at the end here, if we have a few minutes, maybe Nicole and or Jared can kind of talk about those. But just a collection of these story maps that NOAA has done. Our office just published one today about the tornadoes last Friday in our area. Something relatively new in the Weather Service, but a really cool way to tell stories and share information. So that's my pick.
Awesome. And my pick, it's a story out of Illinois. And the headline of the piece says, Doppler dispute. Public weighs in on controversial wind farm proposal that could affect weather services. And I've seen chatter about this in other areas, but the allegations here are that this wind farm would disrupt Doppler and the data would be contaminated. Neil, are you familiar with this at all? The Doppler wind versus wind farm thing? Is this something you've heard of?
The prop wash from the blades can create noise that the radars can pick up. I mean, you can see it in traffic too. If you're looking at the radar here just west of DC, you can see some traffic just appears in a line, same place every day.
Yeah. But anyway, it's an interesting discussion. So that's my pick of the week. All right, Jen, what you got? Go.
So I don't think we've picked this before. This premiered on October 28th, but I know we talked about Max Olson and his chasing of Ian and setting up the GoPro, and then this amazing surge video that he took at Fort Myers. He's actually put together a 30-minute documentary with he and Aaron Rigsby. And I watched it Friday night. I couldn't speak. I mean, it was amazing the way he put that together. And he talked about, if you haven't seen it, you need to watch it. It's on YouTube. During that shot, there was a house that got pushed and was thrown away. There were people in that house, and they survived, and they interviewed them at the end. And they actually had their 2 dogs with them as well, and they survived too. Their story is amazing, and I think that any broadcaster, anybody who is talking about surge should take this video and play it so people can see this is what happens. This is, and their recollection of everything that happened being pulled away, and all, it's just, you have to watch. It was just a very emotional piece. So that is my pick of the week, and please go check that out.
Awesome. I need to do that for sure. By the way, we should mention Bill Murray is out this week. It's 50-cent beer night at Hooters, and he should be back with us next week. All right, Troy, what you got? Go.
Good article. I found it interesting anyway, and I kind of want to get Neil's view on this a little bit out of the AGU's EOS publication back on the 1st of November, talking about sea salt aerosols and the fact that we tend to see less lightning over the oceans and more over the land. And there's some new research suggesting, I'm reading off the headline now, that some of those aerosols seed the large raindrops, and that essentially, in a way, the presence of the sea salt aerosols may tend to starve at least the water and the ability of ice crystals, so forth, to make lightning. But it's an interesting article. Get a chance to take a look at it.
Yeah, it's
Awesome.
when that came out, I saw it and thought it makes sense, but I hadn't really thought about it that way. But
yeah,
I mean, it's ionized. It totally makes sense. But I guess maybe from my perspective, actually being out in the water on a boat, having an engine that's all metal sticking down in the water is a much more larger concern.
Well, I think part of it, Neil, was the fact that the article, sometimes the way we are sometimes as meteorologists and scientists is you want to take one thing and tie it to one thing. And we know there are very few things in weather tied to one thing. And so a lot of people saying, well, it's not just simply about salt spray. And I agree with that, but it's an interesting article anyway.
It is. And I think it probably highlights something that a lot of people take for granted. And that's, we don't have a lot of good information over the ocean, particularly at the surface layer, other than a handful of buoys. And it's a huge data sparse region.
Well, it's been nice though to get the satellite, at least the geostationary lightning mapping information from the satellites. Now that's been really useful.
Awesome. All right, Kim, what you got for us? Pick of the week.
I have a pick that I chose. I'll get to it in a second. We haven't discussed yet, though, that a guest we had on our show maybe a month or two ago, he was seeking election in Congress and he won. And so it's the first meteorologist in the U.S. House of Representatives in 50 years. So hooray, congratulations, Eric Sorensen. And
there you go, Eric.
We have a mole. We have an insider now. Yes.
Yeah, we have an insider. So yeah, good luck to him. I'm sure that'll be nothing but a positive life experience. So my pick of the week is something that the National Academies put out. It's a resource that was in response to a request that they got for their Societal Experts Action Network, Sean. And it was a request about how is it that we can think about engaging socially vulnerable communities. We talk about social vulnerability a lot these days, but how are you supposed to even approach that? And how can you communicate with people who are in, who are more at risk from the kinds of hazards we care about? The article has a framing about climate change to it, but a lot of what they discuss is really evergreen to just hazards communication generally. And it kind of, the way they've put it together is very much kind of like a story map sort of thing. So it's not like a boring article to read. You can go through it, scroll down. They break things up with a lot of lovely pictures and, just it's really approachable material if you're interested in the topic.
Awesome. Great pick. And again, this will be up on weatherbrains.com. All right, Jared, we have stalled long enough. It is time now for you to give us an amazing, remarkable, unbelievable pick of the week.
Oh, wow.
Well, big pressure. I'm gonna highlight the current public version out there of National Weather Service SAFER, situational awareness for emergency response. If one is to Google that, we'll have the links there, but you just Google NWS SAFER if you want to see up to the minute on your desktop watches and warnings, severe wise, flash flooding wise, wildfire components, especially if you're central and west. Not to say that east doesn't get wildfires too, but if you want up to the minute information of where hotspots are, where are the building footprints within those hotspots? Are there any nearby? What are the damage locations for that wildfire, the perimeters that may be ongoing during the summer, or, hopefully not anytime soon, but if you have a drought going into the fall, you can still have some significant wildfires too. So you can look at all the thematic GIS maps per hazard that the Weather Service resources and can be a nice situational awareness display.
Awesome. And you can bookmark that. That comes in very, very handy. Great pick. Okay, Nicole, go. Give us something good.
Okay, I'm going to pick something at the intersection of Kim and Jared's pick of the week, or maybe rather Kim's mention of your recent guest who won election. It's resilience.climate.gov. And the long name for it is the Climate Mapping for Resilience and Adaptation Portal. It's a project led by the White House, executed or directed by NOAA, and executed by Esri. So the three working together to deliver this online portal resource that local, state, local, tribal communities can use to understand how they can plan for resilience. So it has a section that is a screening tool where you can put in your zip code, address, county name, tribal land, etc., and understand the different hazards, how the different hazards will change in that area under low and high emission scenarios. So, and then there's also a component of real-time situational awareness. So wildfire locations, population under flooding threats, etc. And then what's really cool is there's a page about all of the federal funding available for communities to take advantage for developing their own adaptation plans. So if we've got any resilience planners out there, this is the site to check out. Resilience.climate.gov is my pick.
Awesome. And these picks all of them will be on the website, weatherbrains.com. So Nicole, if somebody wants to follow you, get in touch with you, or are you on social media, on the Twitter, Facebook, anything? What's the best way people can follow you?
So my Twitter bio says something like, I mostly tweet about figure skating as a competitor and fan. Sometimes GIS makes an appearance. If you're into that, follow away. Might not stay there long, but let me know where y'all go after Twitter.
It's Mastodon. We are. The problem with the general public with Mastodon, you have to talk about servers. And I've learned when you start talking about servers, people, you lose them, Joe Q public, but you have to find an instance. You have to find a server. You become part of that community. And then everything is federated. It's all, linked together. And there's not centralized. There's no centralized server somewhere. It's really interesting. And I've been on Mastodon for years, but there is a flood of new people that are finding instances and communities. And so anyway, and again, on Mastodon, you don't tweet, you toot, which is also slightly different, but that seems to be the next hipster place. But anyway, okay, Jared, so how can people get in touch with you or follow you? Give us something, a social media account.
Sure. Yeah, on Twitter for sure, especially within the science realm. Facebook and LinkedIn as well. But Twitter, Jar Allen, Jar Allen. You can find me on Twitter there. One interesting component, I know, James, you do a lot on Snapchat as well. Speaking of social medias, and Snapchat Map is actually a very interesting GIS space because you can actually verify a lot of storm reports based off Snapchat Map.
Now that's crowdsourcing.
Yeah, so we actually use that with the people that publicly put their stuff on Snapchat Map to verify or see how bad, say, a winter storm or a tornado or whatever impact it may be on there. So interesting resource to use, but Weather Service offices do use Snapchat Map as well.
Yeah, I will say I have in the past. It is very useful. I mean, immediately you can glance at that and see if something is verifying, if you're getting reports. And so there's just so many great tips. But I think, Rick Smith, anything else we did not cover, we need to cover before we close here? You've done a great job of facilitating this tonight.
Well, I don't think so. I think I want to thank again Nicole for the suggestion and for bringing this up, and for both her and Jared for being here. We could do a whole other show on this, just a lot of stuff we didn't get to cover, but hopefully you get the point that GIS and weather are linked together and cannot be torn asunder. So good stuff, good information from both of you guys tonight. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a great show tonight. And thanks to all of you for listening. For those that are new here, we typically do the show Monday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. And for those that watch live or watch later, they're finding our YouTube channel, youtube.com/weatherbrains. But we know that most of you listen to the audio podcast. So however you consume this, thank you. Our email address here, it is email@weatherbrains.com. If you have questions or guest suggestions, we love those. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless. Thanks, everybody. This was a great show. This was outstanding. Outstanding.
Nobody find me on Twitter. Don't do that. Go to LinkedIn. Send me an email.
I'm not on the internet at all, so you won't find me anywhere.
Yeah, Neil is off the grid. OTG.
The only one that's got it right, I think.
I'm headed back to my cave. I'll see you guys next week.
All right. Well.